I've been sitting on this story for a long time, mostly because I still don't fully understand what happened to me, and part of me was embarrassed I'd put myself in that position in the first place. This was back when I was 25, single, with a lot more free time than sense, before my wife, before my kids, before any of the responsibilities that would have talked me out of what I used to do for fun. Disappearing into the backcountry alone for days at a time, with nothing but a pack and a tent. No cell signal, no set plan anyone could check on. My friends thought it was reckless. Honestly, it probably was, but that was part of the appeal. I did trips like that a few times a year, almost always somewhere in the southern Appalachians. By that point, I'd been doing it long enough that I considered myself fairly competent out there. I knew how to read weather, how to ration water, how to pick a defensible campsite. I say that only because it matters later. I wasn't some kid who wandered into the woods with no idea what he was doing. This particular trip was in a stretch of wilderness I'll just call Hollow Creek, since I'd rather not point anyone toward the exact trailhead. I'd been out there 2 days already, and it had been about as perfect as those trips ever get. Clear skies, a quiet trail, not another soul since the first morning. I remember thinking, on that second afternoon, that I'd made the right call coming out there alone. The first 2 days had gone by exactly the way I wanted them to. I set up camp near a creek bed the first night, cooked over a small fire, and slept better than I had in weeks back home. The second morning, I broke camp early and covered a good distance before the heat set in, stopping only to filter water and eat something out of a bag that barely qualified as food. It was the kind of trip that reminds you why you keep doing something everyone else thinks is a little unhinged. That feeling didn't last. Around midday, the sky to the west had gone the color of a bruise, and within the hour, the wind was strong enough to bend saplings sideways. The temperature dropped fast enough that I stopped to add a layer. By the time the rain actually hit, it wasn't a passing shower. It was a full downpour, and I was on an exposed section of ridge with a metal-framed pack on my back and lightning starting to crack uncomfortably close. I picked up my pace and started scanning the tree line on either side of the trail for anything that could pass as shelter. Then, through the trees to my left, I saw something that felt like a small miracle. A structure, small, dark, half swallowed by the forest, but unmistakably built by human hands. I practically ran for it. Up close, it turned out to be a one-room cabin, the kind that looks like it started life as a hunting shack or an old homestead outbuilding decades ago. There was one window on the side I approached, a door that gave when I pushed it, and inside, dry air, a stone fireplace choked with old ash, a wooden chair, a small table, and what looked like a cot frame against the far wall. It smelled awful in there, but I didn't care. I stripped off my soaked layers, found a dry patch of floor, and lay down. For the first 10 or 15 minutes, I wasn't thinking about anything except being out of the storm. It was only once my heart rate settled that I actually started looking around with my flashlight, and that's when the cabin stopped feeling like a stroke of luck. There was a sleeping bag rolled up near the cot frame that looked far too new for a place this old. A couple of water jugs and some cans sat on the table, like someone had been using this place as a base camp fairly recently. None of that was strange on its own. Hunters and backpackers use remote cabins like this all the time. What bothered me were the marks near the door. Dozens of scratches gouged into the wood at every depth and angle, with no pattern to them at all. When I checked the door itself, I found a metal bracket mounted on the outside of the frame, clearly meant to hold a padlock. There was no matching latch on the inside. That door could only ever be locked from the outside. I told myself it didn't matter, that whatever had happened here was old history, and went back to drying off. Then I checked the window. The glass was still intact, which surprised me given how old everything else looked, until I noticed screws driven into each corner of the frame from the outside, sealing it permanently shut. And around the inside edge of that same frame, more scratches, deep ones, the kind you'd leave clawing at a window with your bare hands, trying to get it open from the inside. It all landed on me at once. Someone had been kept in this cabin. Not stayed, cabbed. I thought seriously about leaving right then, but it was still pouring outside. Everything in the room looked decades old, even if the sleeping bag didn't, and the idea of walking back out into that storm felt worse than staying a while longer. So I stayed, and I told myself that was the practical choice, not a reckless one. I'm not sure how much time passed after that. Maybe an hour, maybe more, with rain hammering the roof loud enough to drown out almost everything else. That's probably why it took me so long to notice a new sound, a slow scraping along the outside wall, followed by 2 heavy thuds on the little porch. Not storm sounds. I froze, straining to hear over the rain, and my eyes drifted toward the window, though I couldn't make myself actually look through it. If someone was out there, they'd be looking back. I actually considered just walking out right then, storm or no storm. I got as far as picking my boots back up before talking myself out of it, telling myself that whoever or whatever had built that setup was probably long gone, that the dust on everything meant years, not days. It's the kind of logic that sounds reasonable when you badly want to stay somewhere dry. I put the boots down. That decision is the one I keep coming back to more than any other part of that night. After a while, the sound stopped, and I let myself believe it had been a branch or an animal poking around. I was almost calm again when I felt, more than heard, something lean its full weight against the door from the other side. The wood groaned, the latch rattled once, and then the pressure released. That's when it actually hit me. If someone was circling this cabin in a storm like that, why hadn't they simply walked in? The door wasn't locked. Nothing was stopping them, unless the point was never to get in. Unless the point was to keep me from getting out. I decided I didn't care about the rain anymore. I started shoving my gear back into my pack as fast as I could, and I was maybe 30 seconds from the door when I heard glass shatter behind me. I spun around just in time to see something come through the window before the whole room went up in flame, faster than anything wooden should burn, even with a metal roof overhead. The heat hit me like a wall. The door wouldn't budge. It had been jammed shut from the outside. I threw my whole body into it until it finally gave, and I went down with it. I don't remember getting back on my feet so much as I remember already running, blind, through rain and trees, trying to put distance between myself and that fire. Something hit me from behind, and I was on the ground again, fighting for my life against a person I never got a clear look at, clawing, screaming, taking hits to the head and throat before I managed to shove them off and keep running. I looked back twice. Both times, the cabin was a wall of flame behind the trees, shrinking a little more each time. I didn't stop until my legs simply quit working, and I ended up crawling into a gap under 2 fallen trees, where I sat until some feeling came back into my body, and some instinct told me it was move or die. I don't fully know how I found my way out that night. I stumbled onto a trail eventually, and followed it blind, and the first person I ran into at a trailhead parking lot drove me straight to a hospital. 2nd-degree burns on my forearm and the back of my neck. The doctors said I was lucky about the smoke. The police took my statement, but I hadn't been anywhere near a marked trail, and I could tell from their faces that nothing was going to come of it. What still gets me isn't even the fire. It's the timing of everything that came before it. Someone didn't happen to be walking by. Someone circled that cabin for the better part of an hour, tested the door, and only lit the place up once I was already trying to leave. I've thought about it more than I'd like to admit. Whether that cabin had been used for something like that before. Whether I was the first person to stumble into it mid-storm, or just the first one who lived to talk about it. I've gone back over every detail so many times it doesn't even feel real anymore. The sleeping bag that looked too new, the cans on the table, the bracket meant for a padlock. Someone had built that place into a trap long before I ever wandered into it, and I happened to be the one who found it on the one night it was still in use. I looked up the area online more than once in the months after, half expecting to find news about a missing hiker or some old case that would explain what I'd stumbled into. I never found anything. Maybe it's still out there in the county records somewhere, or maybe it never made it that far. I never told my wife the real reason I stopped taking those solo trips. I just let her believe I grew up and got more responsible. I'm not going to correct her, and I'm never setting foot anywhere near Hollow Creek again as long as I live. My name's Derek. This happened 7 or 8 years ago, back when I was in my early 20s and still doing things I probably shouldn't have been doing. I had a friend, Mason, who was sort of legendary in our group for finding places nobody else would think to look for. Abandoned buildings, shut down factories, anything you weren't technically supposed to be in. He spent an unreasonable amount of time on satellite maps and urban exploration forums, and he'd show up in our group chat every few weeks with screenshots of somewhere new he wanted to check out. Most of our friends would say it sounded insane and leave it there. I was usually the one who said, "When are we going?" Mason and I had been close since high school, mostly because we had the same appetite for risk. So when he texted me one weekend about a decommissioned fire lookout tower he'd found deep in a forest a few hours from us, abandoned for years and sitting completely untouched, I didn't need much convincing. He said we could hike out, climb it, and spend the night at the top. I was skeptical that something like that wouldn't be fenced off, or at least posted, but I agreed to at least go take a look. Mason had a habit of undersizing everything when he was trying to talk you into something. The drive, the hike, the risk, all of it always sounded a little more manageable in his pitch than it turned out to be in reality. I knew that about him going in, and I still fell for it every time, mostly because the payoff usually was worth it. This felt like it would be one of those times. It was about a 3-hour drive, followed by a hike Mason promised was short, maybe 4 miles, off any marked trail. We left early on a Friday morning and reached the base of the tower by mid-afternoon. Seeing it through the trees for the first time actually stopped me in my tracks. It had to be 70 feet tall, a metal skeleton with a small enclosed room at the very top, sitting there completely unprotected, no fence, no warning signs, like it was just waiting for someone to find it. Up close, it looked rougher than I'd hoped. Bent railings, rust-eaten bolts, old graffiti near the base. Not exactly confidence-inspiring, but Mason was already climbing before I'd finished thinking it through. So I followed. Mason had a theory ready before we even reached the base. Something about the tower being used by hunters, or maybe forestry workers doing informal night surveys, and I remembered telling him that didn't explain why the whole thing was sitting there, completely unsecured. He didn't have an answer for that. He just wanted to climb it, which honestly summed up most of our friendship. The stairs zigzagged up the outside of the frame, and the last stretch was a straight vertical ladder inside a narrow steel cage. A few of the bolts felt looser than I would have liked, but we made it to the top without incident, and the view up there was genuinely unreal. Miles of forest in every direction. The sun maybe an hour from setting. There was a wide walkway that wrapped around the little cab at the top, and that's where we set up, cracking a couple of beers and just sitting with the view for a while, talking about nothing in particular. Once it got fully dark, though, the whole mood shifted. There wasn't a single light anywhere below us in any direction, and something about that much emptiness got under my skin more than I expected it to. Mason noticed I was on edge, and because by the time it reached the base, it stopped directly beneath us and simply held there, glowing straight up through the dark. Whoever or whatever was holding it, completely invisible from our angle looking down. We must have stared at that light for a good half an hour. Mason, being Mason, eventually cupped his hands and yelled down, "Hey, are you good?" I could have thrown him off the tower myself in that moment. Nothing answered. The light didn't move. He tried again. Still nothing. We were 70 feet up with our only way down sitting directly under something that wouldn't speak and wouldn't leave. At some point, I stopped caring about being quiet and just aimed my own flashlight straight down, and still couldn't make out any source, just the glow itself, unattached to anything I could identify. Then, while we were mid-argument about whether Mason should actually climb down to check it out, an idea I told him flat out was suicidal, I glanced down again, and the light was simply gone. No fade, no visible movement away. Gone. That should have felt like relief. It didn't. If anything, not being able to see whatever had been sitting under us for half an hour felt worse than watching it. We agreed to wait out the rest of the night inside the cab instead of out on the open walkway, and neither of us even pretended we were going to get any sleep. About 20 minutes after we went inside, the sounds started. Metallic clangs traveling up through the tower's steel frame. Definitely not footsteps, followed by a grinding sound like metal twisting against metal. They came from different points around the base, which meant whatever was making them was moving. We sat pressed against opposite walls of the cab, watching every window we could see, whispering theories neither of us actually believed. Then I saw it, a dark shape sliding across one pane of glass, then the next one over. I yelled before I could stop myself. We both scrambled to the door and put our backs against it, because if someone was going to get in, they were going to have to get through both of us first. I kept scanning the windows and couldn't find the shape again, which made no sense unless it was low to the ground somehow. There was nowhere for it to have gone that fast. Neither of us spoke much during those hours. Every so often, one of us would whisper something like, "Did you hear that? Or is it still out there?" And the other would just nod or shake his head, because talking felt like it might draw whatever was down there back up to us. My legs went numb from sitting in the same position for so long, and I didn't dare move to fix it. We sat like that, backs against the door, for what felt like the longest stretch of my life, until the sky finally started turning gray. When it was light enough to see clearly, I counted to 3 and swung the door open, half expecting someone to be crouched right there, waiting. Nothing. We circled the cab, checked the base from above. Nothing down there either. We grabbed our stuff and started down as fast as the rusted staircase would let us. We made it about 3/4 of the way before Mason stopped dead on a landing, staring at the next flight down. An entire section of the staircase was gone. Not a few missing steps, a whole run of stairs simply removed, like it had never been bolted there at all. Someone had taken that section apart at night, directly beneath us, without either of us hearing anything close to the sound that should have made. We had to jump the gap to keep descending. Mason rolled his ankle landing on the other side. I got lucky and didn't. There was nothing waiting for us at the bottom. No person. And as far as we could tell, not even the missing steel from the staircase itself lying around anywhere nearby. We didn't stick around to look harder. We drove home mostly in silence, and Mason, of all people, was the one who suggested we just not talk about it for a while. We did talk about it eventually, more times than I can count. Mason looked up the tower online afterward and never found so much as a forum post mentioning it, which bothered him more than he let on at the time, since finding obscure places was supposed to be his whole thing. Neither of us has been back, and neither of us has brought up going back, not even as a joke. To this day, I don't have an explanation for any of it. Not the light, not the sounds circling the tower, not the shape sliding across the glass, and least of all, how somebody dismantled a section of steel staircase in the dark, in near total silence, while the two of us sat directly above them the entire time. I still go camping alone a few times a year, but this isn't about a camping trip. This happened at my own house over the course of nearly a decade, and it's a large part of the reason my fiancée and I are seriously considering moving somewhere else entirely. We live at the end of a dead-end street, which means instead of backing up to the woods on just one side, like most of our neighbors, our property borders it on 2. The forest back there is enormous, genuinely too large to have ever fully explored, even growing up nearby. I never minded that. If anything, I liked how isolated it made the place feel, right up until I didn't. The first thing happened maybe 8 years ago, during our first winter in that house. I went out to my truck on a Sunday morning and noticed a single trail of footprints in the fresh snow, leading from a gap in our side fence straight across the yard and stopping at the driver's door of my car, then leading right back the way it came. Not toward the house, not near any window, just to my car and back into the woods. My fiancée hadn't been outside, and neither of us could come up with any explanation that made sense. We let it go, mostly because there wasn't anything else to do. It was at least 2 winters before anything else happened. This time it wasn't one trail. It was everywhere. Footprints in the driveway, around every window, ringing the entire perimeter of the house, like something had spent the night circling us slowly. I didn't have time to look closely before work, but by the time I got home, my fiancée had noticed something that turned my stomach. None of the prints had any shoe marks at all. Whoever, or whatever, had walked barefoot through freezing temperatures. They looked human in shape, but neither of us wanted to say that part out loud yet. We called my father, who'd lived in that same house decades before us, and he said he'd never seen anything like it in all his years there. He told me to take a rifle and try to follow the trail before more snow covered it. I didn't want to, but I did. About 30 minutes in, the trail split into 2 separate paths with no clear reason why. No crossing point. Nothing. I remember standing there, trying to work out whether I'd been tracking one person the whole time, or more than one, and neither answer sat right with me. It got dark before I found anything, and I turned back. It snowed hard again that night, and erased whatever was left. The police told us, fairly enough, that there wasn't much they could do without evidence of an actual crime. Nothing else happened for years after that. We got engaged. Life moved on in the normal way, and I think we'd both mostly convinced ourselves we had imagined how strange it felt at the time, or at least talked ourselves into calling it a fluke. We stopped checking the yard every morning before work. We stopped flinching every time a branch scraped the siding at night. Looking back, I think that stretch of normal years is almost the worst part, because it meant we'd fully let our guard down by the time it started again. Then, this past January, we woke up to it again. Footprints across the entire property. Worse than before, this time leading straight to our shed. Several tools were gone. My fiancée broke down that morning, asking if this was ever going to actually stop. I called a friend of mine, Nolan, an experienced hunter who happened to own a thermal scope for his rifle, and asked if he'd help me track whatever this was after dark. He drove over within a few hours, no questions asked. After the second round of footprints years earlier, I'd spent a stupid amount of time trying to figure out what animal could leave a barefoot human print like that in snow. Bears don't match. The toes were wrong. Nothing native to our part of the country matched either, not that I could find. I mentioned it once to a coworker who hunts, and he just laughed and told me I was overthinking a couple of teenagers messing with us. I wanted to believe that. We geared up and headed into the woods that evening, mostly quiet after the first 45 minutes or so. The kind of quiet that happens when 2 people separately realize how serious a situation actually is. The trail split again almost immediately, the same way it had years before, and this time it kept splitting. 3 separate dead ends that forced us to backtrack and pick the trail back up each time. Burning daylight we didn't have much of to spare. Nolan pointed out something that had been bothering me too. Whoever left these prints could double back on their own trail cleanly enough that it never once looked disturbed. That's not an easy thing to pull off over and over in snow without a single misstep. Eventually, it started getting dark for real, and Nolan was checking his scope more and more often. Without it, I honestly don't think I would have kept going. We were walking in total silence when he suddenly put his arm out across my chest to stop me, staring dead ahead through the scope, completely still in a way I had never once seen from him. After what felt like 20 full seconds, he crouched behind the nearest tree without a word, and I followed without asking why. He looked through the scope again, and I watched his hand start to shake. When he finally passed it over to me, I had to bite down hard to keep from making a sound. I remember every second of the wait between him handing me the scope and me actually looking through it. Time does something strange when you're that scared. It stretches and skips at the same time. Part of me wanted to hand it straight back without looking. I didn't. Through the scope, huddled together in the snow, were 4 shapes. My first instinct was bears. It wasn't that. They were human in outline, 2 large hunched figures, and 2 much smaller ones clinging to a nearby tree, their heads jerking around erratically. They appeared to be eating something I couldn't identify from that distance. All 4 of them were completely naked, despite the cold. It's the single most disturbing thing I have ever seen with my own 2 eyes. And a thermal scope doesn't even give you a face, just enough shape to know with total certainty that what you're looking at isn't right. After a while, the 2 larger figures lifted the smaller ones onto their shoulders and walked off deeper into the trees, unhurried, like nothing about the last hour had interrupted them at all. Nolan and I didn't move from behind that tree for what felt like an hour afterward. When we finally made it back to the house, my fiancée was still awake, and I told her as little as I could manage while still being honest with her. We called the police that night. They searched the woods with us the next morning, but called it off after a few hours once the snow had covered too much of the remaining trail, and they weren't willing to escalate a full search over some missing hand tools. I told my father everything a few days later, mostly because I felt like he deserved to know what had happened in the house he grew up in. He went quiet for a long time on the phone, and then admitted there had been a few things over the years he'd never mentioned to me. Nothing as dramatic as this, just a feeling every so often that something was watching the place from the tree line. He said he'd always written it off as nothing. He wasn't as sure of that anymore either. None of our neighbors have ever reported anything like this, as far as we've been able to find out, which is part of what makes it so hard to make peace with. I don't know why our property specifically keeps drawing this back after all these years, or what it even wants from us when it does. In the weeks right after, my fiancée barely slept. She started keeping every door double-locked before it even got dark, and I caught myself doing the same thing without really deciding to. We talked about cameras, about a dog, about just boarding up the side of the house that faces the tree line. Some people I've told about it think whatever we saw out there is harmless, just something that lives in those woods and happened to wander close over the years. Others tell me flat out that we're in real danger and shouldn't wait around to find out which one of them is right. For now, we've put motion lights around the whole yard. We're fencing off as much of the tree line as we reasonably can afford to, and we're trying to move up our plans to leave that house for good.